the meeting of the Policy Committee for February the 5th, 2020. This is our second evening policy meeting under our new schedule. And just to remind everyone, this is a committee meeting and to give the committee and other board members a chance to discuss policies that are being put forward either for second reading, for first reading, or for discussion, and to engage in dialogue or questions about those policies before they become either revised or new policies of the district. With that intro, Dr. Yanni, do we have any announcements or communications?
Tonight, we'll be talking about Policy 220 and an AR we're putting forth to accompany that. There has been some previous discussion about a civic engagement policy, and so when we talk a little bit about that AR, the intentions will come through.
Excellent. We have minutes from our January 8th, 2020 meeting. If anybody has any questions or comments about those. Hearing none, we will move them forward for approval. And that'll put us into the guts of our policy meeting this evening. We have 8 policies for second reading. These are policies that we visited our last policy committee meeting and were approved for first reading at the legislative meeting. They've now come back. There were no substantive changes to these policies in that they went through first reading. A couple linguistic changes and some reordering of provisions. But it's probably useful for us to talk about or at least touch on each one of them.
Sure. Before we do that, I would just like to say that the allergies policy, I'd like to pull off for tonight. I want to work with our nurses a little bit more to broaden that scope. We talk about EpiPens, but we don't talk about seizure disorders, students with diabetes, and students with other serious health concerns. So if it's okay with everyone, I'll pull that off tonight, and it'll come back as a first read next month because there'll be some substantive changes.
Excellent. With that, I think we can go relatively quickly in that we've all seen these policies before, but we'll start with 126 class size. Dr. Yanni, do you have anything to add to that?
No, just that the class size caps have been moved to an administrative regulation.
Any questions from the committee members?
I have a comment on the AR. Excuse me. It says, at least annual, no later than the May legislative meeting, superintendent shall provide the board with information. Presumably that's information about the following. Can we be explicit about that?
Sure, I can add that.
Any others on 126?
Just we changed the language from cap to maximum. Is that intentional? I mean, do you see never exceeding the maximum, or?
No, I think if we need to exceed the maximum, we come and we ask the board for that. Cap maximum, I don't know that there's a substantive change in that, but I mean, there are times when, for example, we might be a student or two over, but that would come with, notification to the board and approval to be outside of the guidelines.
We did up the max for 3.5, right? Was it 24? And
I'm sorry, I'm looking at that now. We'll go back to 24. So it's 22, 24, 28.
Oh.
That was the typo. So it'll stay exactly how it is, as it is now.
Okay,
K1, yeah,
okay.
K1-2 has been and will continue to be 22.
Right.
Grades 3 through 5 have been and will continue to be 24.
Okay.
6 through 12 has been and will continue to be 28. Realistically, I can tell you that the vast majority of our sections, K to 12, are not at the maximum.
And so to be clear, that I understood, if during the year enough students move in that were over a cap, or at the beginning of a year, we might be one over, but some number of students spend a significant time outside the classroom or something like that, you'll come to us, we will approve
an exception,
sure, for that particular
absolutely
purpose. Okay.
Okay, anything else on 126? Otherwise, we'll move that forward. I have P131, which is Parents, Guardians in the Title I program.
We have our Title I audit coming up. This policy looks good to the auditors, and so I'd like to keep it as is. I anticipate a great audit, but they're really nitpicky about the policy, but they like the policy.
Committee members or board members, any questions or discussion? Hearing none, we'll move that one forward. We have P210, which is the use of medications. No, yeah, that one's still on.
Hold on, I'm sorry, my computer froze. While I'm pulling it back up, any members of the committee have any questions?
In fact, just to speed it along, I have no other comments about any of the other second reads. Unless prompted by somebody else, potentially.
Sure. The one change that we made that I just want to draw the board's attention to, there is in the policy a right of refusal for the nurse, that the nurse could say, I don't agree with that medication. We want to make sure that we're clear that that's when the medication is first received, so that the nurses have the responsibility to question it at that time, and not when the child is actually experiencing a medical emergency or in need of the medication.
So that's not new language, right? That's,
It was inferred language, we're just going to make it more clear
okay.
In the policy, or?
in the policy.
Okay, in the AR, I don't see any changes in the AR.
Nothing in the AR.
Okay.
Anything else on 210 from anybody? Okay, we'll move that one forward. As Dr. Yanni said, we're going to take 210.2 off. So we'll move to 814, which is copyright material.
Turn it over to Mr. V.
There have been no changes since the last read, and the bulk of the work really is in the administrative regulation, which comes from our solicitor. It's much more comprehensive than what we had in the past, and allows us to repeal some of the dated policies that we had, like, for example, with respect to software licensing and copyright.
Ms. Evans, we should just make a note that we don't have a link to the AR in the policy. We should just make sure that's expressly there so people can toggle back and forth easily.
If you click on the policy, it says right underneath to view the administrative regulation, click here.
Oh, it is there. Maybe
Yeah.
I have an older version.
Then you'll see a significant section in green and then a whole lot of redlining for essentially obliterating what we had before.
I was having some trouble with other links, so I don't know if there's a board docs issue, but we'll manage.
Any questions or comments on 814?
Phil, in the AR, where you talk about music, so I know it's always an issue, band music or string, or, copying of that.
Yep.
Is that,
So, do you
Discussed
mean like
specifically?
with respect to shows that we
with
do?
respect to violin part 2, they may make, you could make copies of a,
Sure, right. So there are very specific, the policy is, and the AR is general, right, in its language with respect to the responsibility that you have. So the responsibility that you have in that context is to know the copyright associated with your materials, right? So when we go and we purchase music for example, Monco had a concert this last weekend, music in our schools. I mean, there was music purchased, specific number of sheets, and those specific number of sheets were not to be photocopied, and that all of that music was to be collected at the end, right? And that becomes the onus of the organization in that instance. And then within there are different, stipulations for fair use, what you're able to do within an educational context, how you're able to leverage those materials within the classroom, et cetera, et cetera.
So this AR is new. Well, it's all new. What are you doing to get it out to all the staff? Because it's quite a bit in here.
Yep, so then, do you want to speak to?
Sure. So we have two upcoming professional development days. This will be reviewed with the entire staff because there's a lot, and it's very easy to violate copyright rule. So we want to make sure that we at least provide some base knowledge for everyone.
And in addition, as a follow-up, because we revisited social media and electronic communications, I'm meeting with faculty meetings in each of the buildings, and we'll touch base on that, and we'll also reinforce the narrative with respect to copyright.
And to be clear, and correct me if I'm wrong about this, but there's nothing in this AR that's actually new. This is a statement of law, existing law, and we should have been following all of this already. So hopefully, any communication to the teachers is just repetitive, but it's always good to remind people of copyright because it's just so easy and natural to violate it.
Okay, anything else on 814? Okay, we'll move that one forward. We have 817 for second reading, which is the social media and electronic communications policy.
No significant changes since last time.
Okay, any questions from the committee or the board or discussion? Okay, we'll move that one forward. We have 908.1, which is the parental and public input policy.
I apologize. This afternoon I beefed up the AR a little bit, and I'll explain very quickly what the changes were, and I'll make sure that the board sees it. So at the last meeting, we talked about attaching the steps of communication. I also added a section called accepted means of communication. The following are the accepted means of communication with district staff: phone calls, emails, written correspondence via mail, and face-to-face meetings. For communication with the board, email, written correspondence sent via email, and community input periods at board and legislative committee meetings. And then I said that the social media messages, Facebook, Twitter, and any other applications, they are not accepted means of communication with the board. I also added a statement that communication to district staff will typically be responded to within 48 hours unless there's an extenuating circumstance, and to the board of communication to the board of directors within 72 hours.
So I have a couple thoughts on that. As I read the policy, and to be clear, and just for everyone, I've been saying for a while I thought we needed to be public about communication, our methods of communication for the board, what our official intake mechanisms are and are not. But as I read this policy, it really is about communication with staff, and the AR was about communication with staff, and I wonder whether we want to have that all in one place, or should we differentiate between staff and board? I guess I haven't formed an opinion about that yet, but I'm questioning whether we want this all in one policy or not.
I would like it to be all in one policy so that there's one go-to document.
I'm not necessarily opposed to having it all in one place. Maybe we could, I don't know, I think what you said is slightly different than the way it reads. Something about how that's the forms of communication that we monitor. Like, I can't explain what I'm trying to explain, but there's just something about the language that not accepted. Can you?
Well, why don't I just say then, if you want to contact district staff, you can do so via A, B, C, and D. Same thing with the board, and we're not going to monitor.
Correct, monitor.
For example, we have a district Facebook page, and there are from time to time people will send a question. We always redirect them back to sending it via email, because that's not necessarily monitored
Right.
every single day.
We want to be explicit about why those mechanisms about discovery. I mean, I assume this is in part driven by discovery.
Absolutely. So I mean, we can. I don't know that people will understand I don't know if that's going to be meaningful that language is going to be meaningful. I mean, we can simply say we need to be able to retrieve communication to district staff and the board. Therefore, these are the accepted forms of communication.
Yeah, you're probably right. It probably isn't meaningful to put it in there. Just what the result is good enough. Is it?
We do have that language already under electronic communications. We stipulate these official channels that are subject to e-discovery, right? So that piece is explained, you know, as a justification in policy for why we redirect communication to official channels.
Community input period at board and committee legislative meetings, as it reads in the list, is effectively equivalent to email or written correspondence by mail, and I don't think it is. It has a specific purpose, which may be different than the communications that would come by email and written correspondence by mail. And I wonder if it deserves its own little paragraph to explain the purpose of community input.
Yeah, I can put the definition of community input in there and talk about the two different types of, the two different periods of community input. I can extrapolate that out, that's fine.
I also note email is hyphenated in one and not in the other. And so your suggestion is you're going to drop the following are not accepted means?
Yes.
Okay.
This list is in here because I believe at the last meeting we talked about putting a list together so that it was clear. So I will clean up that language and then we'll attach it to the policy.
Okay.
Do we need to say, so sorry, I'm just sort of thinking out loud here. For email to the Board of School Directors, the board doesn't have a publicly available single address. We only have our individual, do we? Is Board of Directors?
Board of Directors
is that
at
a publicly available
udsd.org, yes.
address?
Yep, we do.
Okay. Do we want, is that to be advertised somewhere? Is it in the steps of communication document? Do we prefer communication to come in that way rather than to individual addresses? These are all sort of open questions that I feel like
Right.
we don't have answers to
Right.
yet.
So
And
I'm really not trying to be obtuse. If a community member violates this, we have no recourse.
No, right, so, I mean, that's
So it's
kind
really
of why I'm wondering
information.
if this is an administrative, if this belongs in administrative regulation. I think you put a finger on what I hadn't put a finger on.
Okay.
Is that, so administrative regulation is, how will the administration implement the policy that the board sets?
Sure.
And
Why don't I just call this an informational document and we can
Yes.
that
we can
feels.
attach it?
Correct.
Yeah.
Does that feel better?
That would, yeah, I think that would feel better. And I note in the policy itself, we really it mentions teachers and administrators, but doesn't mention board. So if we do want this to include board, we probably need to broaden the policy.
Sure, we can have board in there, and then what I'll do is I'll take the AR and we'll call it an informational document. Is that good? Everyone in agreement?
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
good idea.
How will people find it? Where will it be?
It'll be attached to the policy.
Okay.
It'll be attached to the policy, but we'll also make sure that this is on the main page of the website because it is something that's well, it's not that it's new, but bringing it to the conscious level. And again, didn't mean to be obtuse, but I think we got it to a good place where it's really not an AR.
Great.
All right, moving forward. The last one is 919, which is the annual assessment of pupil progress.
And there were no changes to that.
Any questions or discussion on second read there? Okay, hearing none, we will move those forward with the exception of the allergies policy to the legislative agenda. Sure.
919, let's just put it on there, just because if the Title I audit may request that, just put it on. Thank you.
We have for second reading repeal 5 policies, 2 of which are being repealed for obsolescence, essentially, energy management and paper reduction, and 3 of which are being repealed because they are now encapsulated elsewhere in the new policies we've just discussed.
To Mr. Sirota's point, the first 2 policies there, energy management and paper reduction, when we reviewed them last month, it was like, doesn't say anything, so let's get rid of them.
Does anybody on the committee or the board have any questions about the repeal of those 5 policies? Okay, we'll move those forward. All right, we'll move to first reading. This is the first time we are looking and discussing these 7 policies and any changes to them. The first is 303, which is employment of district staff, which is a combination and compilation of a variety of policies that were in different spots before. Dr. Yanni?
So 2 things. I'm glad I'm off the hot seat because I can throw it over to our HR director, Ms. Gittin. But also this is, I mean, there are a lot of changes in this because this is merging the 300s, the 400s, 500s into one policy. So, Ashley, we want to walk through these if there's any questions.
Sure. I did want to point out one thing on the employment of district staff, and I just pointed it out to Brooke. In the list of definitions, we're missing temporary in front of professional employees because there are professional employees and temporary professional employees. And I might want to entertain summer school staff just calling it seasonal staff because sometimes we do temporary over a winter break or something like that. Or it might be for a smaller period of time. So we might just want to say seasonal.
So the definition is explicitly about ESY. Is everything else that applies to that, do they apply to seasonal workers?
Yes.
Okay.
Ashley, in the definition section, do we need something to say that, I mean, we're talking about the employment of staff and we talk about employees, something to say that these are the various categories or classifications? Should we make that clear? I just don't want there to be any confusion as to, I mean, we're defining these specific categories, but not the more broader category.
Yeah, we could. The following are inclusive of staff that work within the district, something like that.
Any comments or questions about 303? Ashley, can I ask you one question I had? In the authority part, we talk about setting the compensation. The board shall, by majority vote, approve employment, set compensation, establish term of employment for each and all staff. Does the board set the compensation for all staff, or is some of that set forth in other agreements?
So the board does set either through compensation plans, contracts, or individual one-offs.
And I guess my question is, do we need to distinguish that in the policy if there are different mechanisms so it's clear since we're combining the various categories of employees? I might be overthinking that, but I wanted to throw it out to you.
We could. I guess it would depend on what everybody else thinks. I mean, ultimately, the board approves, like I said, either through the approval of a compensation plan, a contract, individual, or group union bargained. I wouldn't think we would need to get that specific.
I mean, hourly wages and salaries are also approved as part of our personnel report. And the reason I kind of like it being in there, when we hire teachers, for example, if we're hiring an elementary teacher or we're hiring an English or social studies teacher, and they're coming from another district, we don't always move them over, we don't always take their years of experience. If we're trying to find a physics teacher, we might have to, bump that person up on the salary schedule. So it's not just what's in that salary schedule. So I think I really like to keep the language there because it truly is then set when they.
Then we have some discretion. Okay.
It's also, this is in the authority section. This is, the purpose of the authority section is to state why does the board have the authority to set the statements of policy that follow. It's not a statement of policy in itself, so I think that that's all right.
Agreed.
If I have just one, in the delegation of responsibility, I applaud you to add that to in the first paragraph to ensure that the district has a highly qualified, diverse staff to ensure. So if we do not have a diverse staff, which we don't, are we not following our policy? And I'm questioning the word ensure. I'm wondering if there's something else we can say about that.
Well, how do you define diverse? We're not saying that it's a certain number. We're not saying it has to be this. To your point, though.
You could soften ensure by saying with the goal of having a highly qualified, diverse staff. I mean, I think Ashley's right that there's softness in the other language as well that doesn't bind us, but we could be clearer about it by softening ensure as well.
I mean, I think we need to, but and I know we've been struggling for years to get there, and
Anything else on the first read of 303? Okay. Next one we have is 307, which is student teachers. And there were some language changes proposed. Anyone on the committee or the board have any questions about the changes?
I just want to make a comment that, one of the things we are starting to get student teacher requests from online universities that are not based in Pennsylvania, accredited in Pennsylvania, and respectfully, we're not taking those teaching candidates. We want to make sure that the programs that the candidates are coming from are accredited by the Pennsylvania Department of Education, because those pre-service teachers have been given instruction in Pennsylvania academic course standards and have their entire program aligns to pre-service standards, and we can't be sure of any program that's not accredited by our own Department of Education.
Anything further on 307?
In that case, why eliminate the within the state words under the purpose? I mean, it sounds like you really do want to stick with accredited Pennsylvania teacher training institutions.
There's some institutions outside of the state that are
Accredited with that.
trained, yeah,
Oh,
like
they're
Jersey
out-
and stuff.
okay,
Yeah.
Okay.
They cover us.
Okay, hearing nothing further, we'll move to 311, which is suspension and furloughs. I believe this was, again, a compilation of separate policies from different parts that were being put together. Do I have that right, Ashley?
Correct.
Any questions or comments on 311? Okay, hearing none. The next two are 312 and 313. 312 is evaluation of superintendent, 313 is evaluation of district staff, and the superintendent evaluation, policy was left separate, but then again, there was a combination of other staff or employee policies that were combined into 313.
So my evaluation has to be made public, the results of my evaluation. So each year, the board and I have to agree on objective performance measures. And then once I'm evaluated, a statement needs to be put on our website about whether I met or failed to meet or was in the process of meeting goals, and that's unlike any other staff member. There's no other evaluation that is public.
Looking at 312 first, there were a couple changes to that. Any committee or board members have any questions or comments on the changes to 312? Looking at that one first. How about on 313, which is the combined district staff policy?
I do have a comment about 313. The last statement and purpose, which seems like it should be under guidelines, but it says, "The board shall be informed periodically about the results of evaluations." Periodically could mean, every 10 years. Is this an annual thing? Is it an as-needed thing?
I'm comfortable with saying at least annually, because so much of that is drives salary increases or lack of salary increases, so why don't we say at least annually? That's a good point, thank you.
And to be clear, that wasn't new language, that just something I caught my eye.
It also makes it consistent with the authority section, which talks about it being at least annually, right?
So they're performed at least annually, but the board didn't need to be informed previously.
Right, but if we
on
change,
that schedule.
it'll
Right,
marry
yeah.
that up.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? All right, moving on. The next one is policy 705, which is safety. Brianni, anything on that?
So we have a policy about safety, but so much of what we do with safety is confidential. So what the board has to know, obviously, is that we have a safety plan and that we provide professional learning around that safety plan to all of our employees. And when I say all of our employees, we mean even our custodians, our grounds, our maintenance workers, our bus drivers, our cafeteria workers. All really means all. So if there are any specific questions about the policy.
Just for the benefit of the board, the part under guidelines that has like numbers 1 through 7 was moved from the authority point because authority section because it belonged more appropriately at the end of the document. There's a couple language tweaks within, but I didn't want the board to think that that was wholesale new. Most of it was moved, 98% of it. Any questions or comments on that one? Discussion. Okay. The last first read for the evening is 707, which is access to district facilities.
So this is the policy that was discussed several months ago. We have spent a considerable amount of time working out several memorandums of understanding. Memoranda. All right, good. Yeah, okay, good. There has been a long-standing memorandum of understanding between the district and a number of community groups for the use of Cardinal Stadium. We're in the closing or in the last phase of developing one for the Aplex as a result of conversations we had earlier this year about the use of the 15-lane Olympic-side swimming pool and our ability to share. So those will be attached to as documents to the policy as they are finished and brought forth for the board's information.
One comment I would have is that since we're in the community section of the 700s, perhaps we should title it Community Access to District Facilities to distinguish between...
We did talk about that, I'm sorry. I apologize. We'll make sure that that is retitled.
Committee or board members, any other questions or comments on 707?
Just the policy for now.
Or the AR? We're only approving the policy, but of course we can comment on the AR as well.
So I'm sure Dr. Yanni thought a lot about 1A and 1B when you went from 1 to, it used to be 1 and 2. Now you're considering it as a 1A and a 1B. Can you just talk a little bit about?
Yes. Before, the township was given equal rights to access as our own district, groups. With respect to the taxpayers in the township, the way it was written would allow township activity to bump our own students. So school organizations is one, and then school organizations within Upper Dublin Township whose primary purpose involves township preschool and school-aged children is the next one, yes.
So township organizations that are not children are in what category now?
Events or organizations not meeting set criteria above.
Okay, so all the way down to 4.
Yep.
Okay.
And that's consistent. I worked with Mr. Dazio. We looked at several other districts, and that's consistent with what other districts have been doing.
Any other questions or comments on 707?
The AR is quite lengthy because that captures the accurate process that we use to issue permits. What was written in the AR was not comprehensive previously.
Hearing nothing further, we can move those 7 policies forward for first reading.
Just when I'm reading this, Dr. Yanni, all that text which talks about the application, that's been there already? That was there, right? Or is that all new?
That's all new.
Which text do you mean?
Okay. In the AR.
So the bullets 1 through 5 about the approval process? Is that what you're asking, or?
An application for use on buildings will be submitted to
Yeah.
this, yeah.
They were clarified to accurately capture the process. Right now, it's a very long and involved process. We're hoping to streamline that in the coming months, so we'll be making changes to the AR.
You're looking at technology too in the future with the application process?
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Yes. Right now, scheduling is done by hand, and it's
Right.
not an efficient use of time.
Correct. Thank you.
Okay, I think we can move to first reading repeals next on the agenda. There's a series of repeals, I think most of which are because of the combination of policies. If we look at 304, 504, 304-1, 305, 306, 411, 412, 512, and 413, they're all now captured in the amalgamated policies we just talked about on first reading. We also have 414.1 and 514.1.
That information was already captured in another policy.
Excellent. Questions or discussion on those repeals? Okay, we'll move them forward as well. We have one discussion item tonight, and Dr. Yanni gave us a lead into that earlier. We've been discussing for a couple of meetings now a proposed civic engagement policy, and I think as that discussion matured, there was a viewpoint, correct one in my view, that was really covered under an existing policy, which is 220, and Dr. Yanni has now proposed an AR to augment the policy or provide a regulation for the policy with specific regard to a couple areas. Dr. Yanni?
So the AR for politics, political parties, and voter registration education for students actually has 2 parts. The first part, we are memorializing what we already do inside our social studies curriculum and in our courses. So as you see, students will receive instruction about politics and political parties, void of partisanship through the progression of curriculum in United States history. That spans the 8th, 9th, and 10th grade years. When instruction is given on political parties, instruction shall respect appreciation of different political parties so as not to exclude any party that currently has ballot access in Pennsylvania. We tend to talk only about the Democratic and Republican parties when there are a number of other parties that we should be providing instruction on for students. And then students in grade 10 engage in a capstone project that really focuses in a really in-depth way on the United States government and its processes. The second part is voter registration education guidelines. So I spoke with Tony Gianmarco. He is our supervisor of social studies. All senior social studies courses contain information on Pennsylvania voter registration process, even if the course does not include voting and voter registration as a focus area. So there are some students that are taking electives. For example, we have a Cold War elective. Even though voter registration and voting is not an integral part of that course, information is still provided for students by the teachers. At least annually, Pennsylvania voter registration information and registration links will be shared with students via the district's learning management system. And I left that open as learning management system. We're currently using Infinite Campus and Schoology, but if any of those change, I wanted to leave that open. And then information on political parties that have ballot access in Pennsylvania may be shared with students. However, no endorsement of any one party over another will be made. In addition to what's here, at next month's policy committee, I'm going to be bringing forth a proposed politics policy. Right now, we do not have a policy that explicitly puts parameters on staff and the adults in our system to be nonpartisan. So I think it's wise that we bring that forth. It's in review right now with our solicitor, and I anticipate that we'll have some discussion around that next month.
Question about the first point under the voter registration education, that we will share this information in our courses in senior year. I'm just concerned that there are a number of juniors who are likely of voting age, and if we are waiting too long, is there a way to potentially backmap that too?
Sure, we can say
Won't we
junior
reach-
and
Well,
senior.
we'll reach them in the learning management system. Can we say for number 2, will be shared with students who will be of voting age before the next election?
I think
Or
it's
do you
kind
mean-
of
or
two
will it be
different
all
things.
students?
Because they can get a pushed out bit of information.
Yeah, I don't know that, my opinion is, I don't know that we need to get into the curriculum in junior year, as long as they are provided the links when they need it. But, I mean, if we want to say that, we should do it in junior and senior year, I'm not going to argue with that.
I only say that because I know where links go to die, and it's student email and student messages, but maybe there's a different mechanism that the kids are seeing when they're getting Schoology messages that they're attending to better. So that's maybe something that you guys can tell me.
So I'm actually comfortable putting it in 11th and 12th. All kids are also, by virtue of the course, in 10th getting it as well. So I think, I mean, another piece of exposure is not going to hurt anyone.
I'd still like to say the second bullet be explicit about, I mean, unless we really do, are this for all students? All students will get the registration links, or only students who are going to be of voting age?
I don't think it hurts to actually send them to every student with the disclaimer that you have to be 18 by, primary day to vote.
Okay.
I think it brings everything to the conscious level.
Okay, great. Then I would just suggest at least annually should be 2 months or something before each election.
Sure.
So that it's twice a year, specifically catching both the primary and the general. Because, if you turn 18 in June, you're not going to be paying attention.
Sure.
For this.
Good point.
The primary.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, if your birthday's close to the election day, it starts to get tricky when you can register. So the earlier they get the information, the better. Not before their birthday is better.
Good point. Thank you.
So this all started because of the governor's Civic Engagement Award. So if students at the high school want to get involved, and what are you saying? The district will not do the Civil Engagement Award? Does it have to be from the district that has to apply for that award, or
No.
students can apply?
There's actually two awards. There's a student award and a district award. So the students can apply as a student and say, I led a voter registration drive that was this successful and therefore I deserve an award. Someone at the school has to sign off on it, but it's a student award. And then separately, the district can apply for a district award to say, we as a district had students who led a student registration drive that got some percentage and et cetera. So there's two awards. I don't think I answered the question, but just to clear, I'm not sure which award you're asking about.
The district award.
I'm not inclined to, I think if we're trying to be nonpartisan, it's an award given by the governor at this point. I don't know that even another Democrat governor would give it, and I think if our objective is to remain nonpartisan, I think if students want to, apply for the award, that's fine, but I don't think the district should.
I disagree with that, actually. I think if our students do this, I think we should celebrate them the way we celebrate other students who have successes by then applying for the award. I don't think we should push it or encourage it or have a policy saying we'll do it, but I think if one of our students achieved that, I think we should celebrate it.
I would be fine with that, I just don't,
Yeah.
I mean, we're not gonna go on a promotion campaign to,
It would have to be initiated first by student or students. And then if it doesn't meet the criteria, then we could put in a district application.
But I also don't think that's a board level decision. I mean, I think that's up to the high school administration.
Okay, excellent. That was our only item for discussion this evening, so we are up to community input. Any members of the community would like to speak, please come up, state your name.
Peter Brister, Fort Washington. So I wasn't going to speak because I thought, good, they've clarified this. It's short, sweet, and simple. There's not going to be any partisanship in our buildings. And the last few comments, I'm totally confused. Okay, I totally agree with what Dr. Yanni is saying. The district should not apply for any award. I really wasn't aware that there were two awards. The way that initial thing that was written, just said something about awards. It wasn't clear to the public what that even meant. So I'm certainly glad the district is going to try to remain nonpartisan, something we've been for the more than 20 years that I've seen the use of how things have gone in our buildings. We have definitely not been partisan. And why make a problem? I think other people have said that at other meetings. Why would you make a problem when we don't really need the possibility of partisanship, which leads to bullying and all kinds of problems? So I thought that we were going in a good direction, and now I'm confused, and I'm going to ask for some further clarification after I sit down or when other people are done speaking. Because, Art, you said, well, the students have to initiate it. Mark said, okay, that's up to the high school administrators. Doesn't rise to the board level. I'm really confused because look, God bless our students, but I don't know what they're going to initiate. If students initiate something, you need even more guidelines. Are they going to initiate an after-school club and the kids who want to be part of that voluntarily join? Or are they going to be doing it at lunchtime where they might bully or intimidate kids that have no interest in it? I don't know what students are going to initiate. So I think you're leaving this with a complete lack of clarity now. Unless I feel like maybe I'm tired and I'm missing something. But
no, you can stay there for a second, I think.
oh wait, I do have one. Oh my God, I have 1 minute 57 seconds. There must be something else.
I
I was going to commend you, but I just can't do it now.
Can
I'm
I
sorry.
stay there for a second? And
Okay.
Let me just try to clarify, I think, what you're asking. Make sure I understand what you're asking. Right, we don't know what the students might initiate, but the purpose of the politics policy that Dr. Yanni mentioned, similar to the religion policy, which says, you know, there can't be anything specific about any specific religion, there can't be anything specific about any political party. That's the idea behind it. Everything that happens as part of a school, anything,
But if
has to be
students
nonpartisan.
initiate something on school property,
Then it has to be nonpartisan.
it
is
has to
what
be
that will say.
nonpartisan, but you have to know what they're initiating.
No, actually
Oh,
not.
that's not right.
Students are protected under the First Amendment. It doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be
They
nonpartisan.
do, if they do it as a club, if they do it as a school-sponsored activity, then
Yes.
then it has to be
Yes.
nonpartisan.
But the wide berth that the Constitution gives kids is that as long as it doesn't materially or substantially create a disturbance in the school, there is not real recourse that we would have.
Someone, I guess Mark also, no, maybe it was
Did that-
Art,
did that-
somebody has to lead it, right? I mean, it says that someone at the school, or somebody said it, I think it was Art.
Well, what happens
Someone
is
at the school has to sign off or lead it. Students don't,
students lead
to my
it.
knowledge, they
A
don't
school-
spontaneously.
In order to get the award,
Yeah.
a student has to ask someone at the school to basically sign a form saying, yes, this
Someone
actually
at the
happened.
school, meaning a staff member,
A staff member, yeah.
okay?
Could be a county official too.
Can be a county official.
But an adult, they can't just claim they did it, and there has to be verification is the point, for a student to win the student award. So someone has to agree that this actually happened, an adult.
Okay, since I'm down to 24 seconds, I'm just gonna say, you're doing the opposite of what I thought you were doing. I thought it was simple, it was clear, it was consistent with our tradition, which is we keep partisan politics out of our school property, which are paid for by every single person who pays taxes here, all parties. And you're doing the opposite now by this window of well, students can do what they want to get the award. I would tighten that up and clarify before I would bring that
Well, I
to a
think Dr.
legislative
Yanni's
meeting, but
point
you can
is
do it.
we can't, right? We can't to do that outside the normal. I just wanted to give her more time if we could actually clarify I wanted to make sure I understood the question.
Jen Kuznets, Fort Washington. Did we ever get data and numbers of how many Upper Dublin students are actually registered and how many actually turned out to vote? Do we have those numbers, or are we just going off the state numbers or whatever we saw in the document? I'm just curious if it really is an Upper Dublin concern about getting voters registered, or if we're all pretty engaged here in Upper Dublin and so are the students. Because I haven't seen any data about Upper Dublin in particular. So, I mean, if we're talking, and I know I had sent an email to some, if we're talking about numbers and concerning statistics involving children, then we need to also talk about why we don't have driver's ed in class in the school when we have a lot of car accidents and students, die in car accidents at high rates and high numbers. So why are we not looking at that? Or, teen pregnancy, we teach sex ed, but should we be giving out condoms? Is that the same thing as we're teaching civic responsibility in voting, and now we're handing out the voter registrations? I mean, I just think we need to be careful, because if you open one door, you can open a bunch of other doors with certain policies, right? Like the Second Amendment. I mean, who knows what that would end up looking like? It's a right, it's an amendment, it's free speech, it's this. I just think that we need to be really careful. And I'm just curious on that administrative regulation. When we say we'll share information via, what was the term? The district's learning management system, who pushes that out? Is it any teacher is it the principal? Who pushes that out? Is it up to each individual teacher to do it if they want to? So that was for number 2. And then same thing with number 3, information on political parties that have access ballot in Pennsylvania may be shared with students. Who's sharing the information? Like maybe shared by who? Those are some of my concerns, aside from the overall concern about just opening that door in general. And then just on policy 312 about Dr. Yanni's reviews being made public for everyone. Did we do that for Deb Wheeler? Did we do it? Because I don't feel like I ever saw those. They were on the website? Okay. I just was curious. I hadn't heard that. Thanks.
Jenny Vitella, Ambler, also concerned about whatever this is. I'm not even sure what administrative regulation manual is. I don't understand what's new or what's old here. Voter registration education guidelines, after the first sentence, students shall be informed of their right to vote primarily through district social studies curriculum. End of story. That's it. We educate our children about voting, about civics, and that's it. We don't have to lead them to the water. My daughter, 4 minutes and 9 seconds, Googled how to register to vote in the state of Pennsylvania and filled out the form with fake information and didn't submit it. 4 minutes, and she's 13 years old. It's not that hard. If they are really committed to it and interested in politics and interested in all that, they will find a way to get registered. It is not, this is a curriculum issue. This is not an act. We're not creating an act that they have to do. Because again, we teach about guns and war in the military, and we're not going to have a gun registration drive in school. We teach about religion, and we're not going to have a religious drive in school. So I don't really understand what this is as opposed to like a policy or whatever, but getting into 1, 2, and 3 seems more like curriculum information. And again, the same questions that both of them have asked. I continue to be concerned. Thank you.
Seeing no further, we will close community input. Dr. Yanni, do you have any comments?
No.
Any comments from the board?
I do. I don't feel like we're opening any doors. If anything, I think we're putting parameters around anything that can legally already happen. We're being explicit that anything that happens has to be nonpartisan. So I'm not concerned. I think that this is wise and appropriate, and I think coupled with the coming politics and partisanship policy or whatever it may be called, I think we'll have parameters around this that we haven't had in the past. So I think we're heading in the right direction.
I concur with Mr. Sirota on that as well. Any other comments from the board?
The only thing I would say is that information is power in the hands of our students. Getting the information from a designated person who is looking up the information by birth date and knowing who to send the links to, I think is a positive move. And I think it's something we talked about at our last policy meeting, that it's sort of our responsibility as the educators to provide the accurate resources. It's not just about saying you can do it, but providing the resources. It's something I do every single day. So I don't know that it even needs to be, it is all curriculum in my mind, all of this piece. It's all about the education that we provide. So maybe that's just the clarification.
Any other comments? All right. We have information about our next meeting. The next policy committee meeting will be on Wednesday, March the 4th, immediately following the education committee meeting. Anything else, Dr. Yanni?
Next Thursday evening, 6 o'clock, Maple Glen Elementary School cafeteria, budget town hall. Another reminder will go out tomorrow. We're asking folks to RSVP and kindly let us know if you have any questions ahead of time so that as we present, we can address as many of the questions as possible. And obviously, there'll still be time for open question and answer, but we'd like to make the presentation as meaningful as possible.
Excellent. Thank you. And with that, we are adjourned.